Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Triple F Podcast, Faith and Family First, with myself and Jim Hochberg, my co-host. We're going to be talking about what has happened since the overturn of Roe versus Wade and the absolute attack against churches. Let's chat about that.
With myself.
With yourself?
No, welcome. With myself. You said with myself and Jim Hochberg.
Well, myself and Jim Hochberg and my three personalities that are here with me too. So they're going to be a great show today. We have more than two people. Jim, I know that
Are you going to be on Zoom?
Am I going to be on Zoom?
One of yous.
No, you just won't know who appears.
All right.
I'll just change my personality.
Okay,
so let's talk, Jim, about what has happened since, because really there's been attacks against churches for years. So this isn't a new thing. But once Roe versus Wade overturned, something shifted. And all of a sudden, the attacks on churches went off the chart.
That's true. But there was a different group subject to attack before the Roe v. Wade thing, because another politician caused us to have dissension amongst us on another basis other than religion. So this is a breakdown of the civil fabric of the United States of America. We went from e pluribus unum, which is out of many, we are one. We are tolerant, we agree, we do all this stuff, to racial dissension. And then after the racial dissension that President Obama brought us, we ended up with the religious dissension that President Biden brought us.
Well, you and I, and we say this all the time, we've been here in Hawaii participating in the political arena probably at least 30 years. Well, I actually make 30 years of dealing with public policy here in Hawaii this summer. So it's been a long time. But over the course of the years, I too have felt that there has been a shift at the Capitol on the way people of faith are treated. Because in the early days, you could tell those that didn't appreciate us or those that were not on board with our positions. But there was a little bit of a tolerance that I experienced at the Capitol and that I witnessed. But things have definitely changed, don't you think?
No, in fact, I remember being down at the Capitol when you were there too. And I can't remember that guy's name that I think works for the Department of Education or something. He lives in Ainahaina. And he said to you something like, because of your politics, I should hate you, but you're so nice, I can't.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. But I think that makes a good point. We're going to be talking about today the Family Research Council and their report that they just released. So we're going to be talking about that on some of these assaults on Christianity and on the churches. But I think that one thing we have to remember is that no matter how we're attacked, we always need to put on that garment of Christ. We always need to, and we've been attacked a lot. There have been many times. I think the worst hearing I ever participated in, I'm not going to name the senator, but it was in the Senate. I remember the hearing, and it was the one and only time I was ever yelled at by a person sitting across the table. I know you've been gavelled, but for me, because people say I'm such a nice person, I never experienced it. But I do remember this particular hearing because what the hearing was about was a bill that was written basically saying we're going to set up a task force. But what made me laugh is the bill actually said what the task force was going to come up with. We're setting up a task force to say this. And all I did, and I did it with respect, I wasn't rude. I just got up and I said, so basically you're telling the task force what their results are going to be. And I got yelled at. Are you saying that the report has already been written? And I said, no, I'm not saying it's been written. I'm saying that you're giving the foundation for what this report's going to say. And I basically was, and I remember getting up out of the chair and sitting down. Now that senator is no longer in office anymore. So, and I'm glad because I wasn't the only person that experienced some angst from this particular senator. And I remember you had angst toward this senator because this senator was in charge of the judiciary and was not an attorney.
Ah, yes, I do. With
But-
the cowboy boots.
Yes,
Yes, I do.
But isn't it interesting that in the Senate, even today, the chair of the Judiciary Committee is not an attorney?
Carl Rhodes is an attorney, isn't
Is he?
Yeah,
I thought,
yeah, sure he is. He's just not a smart one.
Oh, that is horrible. Okay, so I'm mistaken. I thought he wasn't, but I did remember sitting down and I was with another lobbyist.
In my opinion.
In your opinion. I was sitting next to another lobbyist who looked over and they go, "Wow, Eva, that was brutal." I said, "I know," and I was horrified because
He probably thought you were a lawyer because he really didn't like lawyers.
He really did not. And that was the one and only time I ever kind of had a little fight. And most of the time, as you know, they don't give us a whole lot of time to testify on our issues.
No time to fight over
anything. We get 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or sometimes there's no time limit, but you get gavelled. And Jim, you know this because you've been gavelled many, many, many times. So having said that, we are acknowledging that there has been some awful, I don't want to say attacks, but it feels like an attack when it's happening against people of faith.
But we're also talking about a few here and there in Honolulu that we experienced over a long period of time. And what we're talking about today is hundreds of attacks per year against churches since the Dobbs decision.
It really, that seemed to be where the lid was taken off of a lot of anger.
But they were primed to do that because of what Obama did with the racial stuff.
Yeah. And I'm starting to see it now with the decision on the IVF. There's a lot of attacks now on people of faith who are maintaining their position on IVF. And I know even among Christians, there's fighting now on what that means and how far we go. So I think we have to be mindful that there's always going to be arguments. I mean, as long as we have different political parties in the United States, we're going to have people on both sides of the aisle.
And that used to not require violence.
No. And actually, I think what made us a great country was that there was, in fact, I remember, I've been around long enough to remember when there was around 17 or 18 Republicans in the House.
In Hawaii.
And I remember how good the floor. In fact, I used to love going to the floor debates because this was when you'd get, I don't care, both sides of the parties, right? On both sides. They'd come up and they'd give these speeches. And I loved it. I loved that. And now all it is like talking points, right? Mm-hmm. It's just the same people get up and you know, you and I have talked about that on prior shows. Talking points drive me. There's a time for talking points, but when you're doing
hope, not dope.
When you are having an actual discussion on things, I'd like to hear a little bit more about why you believe what you believe, and I don't want to hear a talking point, no matter how good it is.
Well, and the thing is, the Democrats. The progressive Democrats are so good at everybody using the same talking point on the same day on every channel, on every show. I mean, it's amazing how well organized they are because the Republicans sure don't seem to be that well organized.
I know. And I challenge our viewers and listeners to actually ask questions. So when somebody gives you a talking point, have them drill down a little bit more. Ask them questions that are more than a yes or no. And then you'll find out exactly what people believe, because I watch that all the time. You know, you've got a lot of talking heads that this is what they do. They go out on the road and they're asking people questions on the street. And then these people, they answer with a talking point and then they keep asking them questions. And finally, they just get mad and walk away, because you've got to be able to, especially us as Christians, because we claim that we're doing everything based on a biblical foundation. So we should definitely be able to explain away our positions. But let's talk about this rise in attacks on churches.
Okay.
So let's talk about the Family Research Council report.
So they looked around and said, wow, look at all these statues that are getting defaced, broken, arms or limbs chopped off, decapitated. Look at all the graffiti being put on churches. You know, all that kind of stuff. Right.
So their report is saying that in 2023, they identified, so this is just in 2023, they identified 436 incidents across the United States, in all 50 states. They said these were in all 50 states. and it was more than the number that was identified in 2022. So obviously something happened between 2022 and 2023, and we've talked about what that was. I mean,
but even when the Dobbs decision was pending before the appellate court, before the Supreme Court, people were upset about it potentially being. Remember, that's when Senator Schumer went up on the steps of the Supreme Court and said, you released the whirlwind or whatever it was he said.
Yes, and Maxine Waters made statements like
if you see these people in the restaurant, throw them out or whatever.
And I do think that is where this is coming from. When you have somebody in a position of leadership and they're basically giving permission for people to attack people who do not agree with them, this is what you sow.
Yeah, and what happened in 2022 or 2020 actually with the BLM summer was really emboldening personal violence. Like it used to be in the Vietnam War protests, there wasn't necessarily violence. There was just marching and stuff like that. Then the Rodney King protests, that by that time they were getting kind of violent and beating people up. And it's just getting worse and worse. And the problem is most countries are identified by heritage. The United States is not identified by heritage because we have every kind of heritage there is. We celebrate all their holidays. We eat all their food in the restaurant. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
We're e pluribus unum. And to tear that apart is kind of interesting because it's sort of in the back of the book.
Do you think they teach debate in schools? Because I know when I went into high school, it was mandatory. You had to take debate. And
but
so
you went to Catholic school.
Well, yeah, but that's why I'm asking, because you went to public school. I know that
we had a debate club.
Oh,
they didn't teach it in class.
See, I think that it should be a mandatory thing because you learn how to debate someone properly in the sense where you come with your facts. You each have a chance to talk and you have a chance to rebut what they say. And I know that it doesn't always work because people who watch Senate hearings or whatever, it's supposed to kind of work that way.
Well, no, they're doing two separate shows.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre.
No.
They have nothing to do with debating each other.
No,
they have their own scripts.
No.
They wait their turn and then they put their show on.
Right. All you have to have is a good speechwriter. Somebody who's able to write speeches and be able to deliver it. And actually, have you watched Parliament like in England?
Oh, I love it.
Oh, those guys. Now
I like it in Taiwan. They fist fight and throw chairs. And
no,
stuff.
do they?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen that. That's pretty obnoxious. Now, of course,
it's great.
I'm not saying that that's what I'd like to see happen, but
because WWE is fake.
Yeah, I
the
know
parliaments in Asia
are
real.
It's not WWE anymore, isn't it? Like, I don't know. Anyway, I thought it changed it. But the point is, I'm not saying that that's how I want people to fight. I just want there to be a sharing of different opinions because sometimes when you share your opinion with someone who disagrees with you and then you listen to theirs, you might find there's a small kernel of place you agree. Like on the issue of immigration, I go through this all the time. Everybody agrees that our immigration system is broken and it needs to be fixed. But where they go off the rails is how and what to do. So I just wish that there was a way that we could come to the table and really just bring our best ideas. And then when you have an idea, if I don't like your idea, rather than calling you names or encouraging people to go protest at your house with drums and whatever else, that we would talk.
Correct. So we're almost halfway through. Why don't you go through a list of some of the violent examples?
Well, there are so many. This page, I don't know if you read the full report from the Family Research Council. There's a lot of, so let's just talk generally about what some of the things have been. There have been attacks on Catholic churches against statues. I clicked on some of the links.
Could be Protestants.
No, no, Jim. I would hope not. But I did click. Now, what I liked about the Family Research Council report is there were all
live links.
They all live.
That's why
links.
I got tired.
So I kind of was looking, and you could actually see like there are pictures of people. They're walking into the church, and it's not like they walk in there and they don't have an idea of what they want to do. These people seem to me, and the ones that I checked out, that they walk into the church, they know exactly where Jesus is, and they're going to attack Jesus first. They're going to spray paint him. They're going to, there was a lot of people pulling down statues of Mary. That seems to be a big thing where they spray paint her or chop her head off or whatever. There were a lot of instances of theft where they would steal like the worship equipment or whatever. And of course, fast forward to the most recent, which was the shooting at the church in Texas.
Well, and there was that more recent funeral for the trans woman in New York where they, at I think St. Patrick's Cathedral,
Yes.
where they simply asked to schedule a funeral. And it was actually, when people showed up and everything, it was so disrespectful that the pastor ended up canceling the Eucharist service part of it.
Well, I think that's the thing.
That's just disrespectful.
No, it's
intentional, in your face, disrespectful.
Well, there is, and I see it going on both ends. Like I could see, people showing up at a Catholic mass, for instance, and, screaming. And I've seen that happen, where people are mad at what's happening, across the country as far as the clergy abuse scandal. And to be clear, the clergy abuse scandal isn't just in the Catholic Church. There have been even Protestant churches
and
where some
schools,
pastors
teachers,
and in the schools,
and in the Boy Scouts.
So I want to make that clear that when that happens, you got people that are upset with the whole institution, right?
Correct.
And that's horrible. So I've seen that happen where people will show up at a mass and they'll.
So assume that you were in a church mass, you were in a church service, and this happened when you were sitting in there. And whether it was a person that started shooting people or a person that started spray painting things or a person that was stealing things or breaking things, you're a girl. How do you think you can tell me how it would feel?
Oh, that'd be horrible. That'd be absolutely
But
horrible.
think about it. I mean, you're there in the room, you're watching this desecration take place.
But that's my point. It doesn't matter to me. If I was in a church service and somebody started yelling at the pastor just because they disagreed with the pastor, I wouldn't like that either. It's because what did you say? You said, and because you keep telling me you're moving away from Hawaii, that you're voting with your feet.
I am.
And I think that if you're attending a church service where you don't like what the pastor's preaching, you can move your little happy feet to another church. Find a church that you can support rather than ruining it for everybody else. Now, if the priest or the pastor is involved in something horrible, because I've seen that happen too. I've seen instances where people within the congregation get mad because the pastor is doing something they don't like, and they'll stand up and make a big issue out of it. There is a time and a place, I think, to do these kind of things. But what we're talking about is people that are going into a church that do not attend that church, and they're there to disrupt, and that's their whole purpose.
So, but the reason I asked the question I asked is because I was looking at these events and reading this stuff and thinking about it, and it does not bode well for the United States of America as a nation of people that can live together and not agree. That's what we've lost, the ability to live together peacefully yet not agree. And then I was thinking about the 5th chapter of Matthew, 10 verses 10, 11, and 12, I know that Jesus said these things because the letters
they're in red.
Is red.
It's in red.
And so what Jesus actually says is, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So if Jesus is telling us this is what's going to happen and it's a good thing, then my approach to our subject today kind of got twisted a little bit, because when I started, I was thinking this is a terrible thing and I hate it. And then it's kind of the way Satan always screws everything up. He thinks he's hurting us, but it's actually, according to the Lord, something to greatly, exceedingly rejoice over.
Well, I'm wondering if part of this attack against churches comes because sometimes people want more and more and more. You and I talked about this, right? That when a law is passed, it doesn't mean that that issue is over, right? They want to go in.
Mostly it never is for, I will say, immature people.
Right. And so do you remember in the early days of our lobbying where they would
We
say,
just don't want to be fired from our
Yes.
jobs because of who we love.
and
That's
whatever
all we want.
and whatever you do in the privacy of your own home is
Right.
between you and God and all that. Well, now they want to get into what you're doing in the privacy
Well,
of
they
your
want
own
to take
home.
your kids out
right,
of the
they want to
privacy
take
of your
your
home.
because they don't like what's being done there. And so what's happening is there's a bigger view now of what is okay and what's not okay. And this, we're not talking about what the Bible says. We're talking about what people say. And that's why we're having so much fights today, because everybody's idea of what is right and wrong is different. If you and I were to ignore the Bible, which we would never do, but if we were going to ignore the Bible and make our own rules, I guarantee you my rules would be different than your rules. I guarantee
You want my Bible? Oh, wait.
I miss the old days where you had to have the Bible.
So you could write on it.
No, so people would be carrying those big Bibles and all that. Back in those days when we were really, really little and you'd walk into somebody's house and they'd have the 550-pound Bible on their dining room table or on their living room table. Do you remember those days? No. Did you guys not have one of those big Bibles? The ones that had all the pictures?
No.
Jeez. All right. If you're watching and listening on this, I want you to comment below if you remember having one of those big Bibles on your.
But here's the thing I think it is. The reason there's a desire to attack rather than coexist in disagreement is because the church represents the Creator. And at the very beginning of the fall, Satan couldn't accept the fact that he was not equal to the Creator. Mm. And ever since then, there has been sin and dissension and problems and all that stuff. So what I think we're seeing, and it's just getting into physical form, is the manifestation of the spiritual warfare that's been going on from the beginning.
Yep. And I think if you attack the churches or the attack against the churches is just proof that the devil wants to take down any organization that preaches the word of God. That is probably top on the devil's priorities. And we have to say that those attacks that have been happening is not just against churches. Pregnancy resource centers have been attacked. Our counterpart in Wisconsin was also
firebombed.
They were firebombed. So we're seeing this happen. Anybody who's willing to put their neck out there and preach the gospel is going to pose a target to the devil, and we need to be prepared for that.
And that's why Matthew 5 says, if you're persecuted for righteousness, exceedingly rejoice.
And it also says, blessed are the peacemakers. You skipped over that part.
The cheesemakers?
Oh, no.
The purveyors of dairy products in general.
Jim is referring once again to Monty Python. So for those listeners and viewers who are Monty Python.
The Life of Brian.
Life of Brian, yes. But to be fair, we need to be responsible for what we're doing and what actions we're bringing. So I think the Lord does call us to be peacemakers, but there is a time. And I think we need to be clear about that, because I think people always say, Eva, you're too nice. You're so nice. You're nice. And I always tell everybody, please do not mistake my niceness for weakness, because I wouldn't have stayed in this position as long as I have if I was
correct.
weak.
I agree with you.
Now, it is true that I look at things different than people. I do believe that there is a way that we can come to the table, even if we disagree. I have had conversations with Planned Parenthood. The workers, I should say, some of the workers of Planned Parenthood. It's not like I go to every Planned Parenthood and have conversations. I've had conversations with doctors and nurses that promote abortion, because I believe that in that conversation, first of all, I want to show Jesus in everything I do, because I want them to walk away going, like that guy, what is it about this person that I want to hate and I can't? I want them to be able to have a conversation and want to have that conversation with me. So I think overall, we could talk about all the attacks against churches and against pregnancy resource centers and people of faith. But what's the answer? To put on the full armor of God, and to stand firm, because that's what the Bible says. Stand firm and know that if we open our mouth and are willing to preach the gospel, that only the truth can come out of our mouth if that's what we're taking in, right? We have to take in the gospel in order to preach the gospel. So if that's what we're surrounding ourselves in, then we have to be ready to be attacked, because the devil is not going to like it.
That also means that we can't buckle under fear of something unpleasant happening to us. Because these things are very unpleasant. That's what I was trying to get at. To be sitting in the room, not to be the person hit with the stick, but just seeing it in your church service is very unpleasant. And we don't like unpleasantry.
No, it's overwhelming. And I admit it publicly that I get tired, Jim. I get tired sometimes of this. Sometimes I ask, Lord, I would love to just work at a Starbucks and drink coffee all day. There's a million
Try
other
an
things.
Ice cream store. I did that.
Ice cream store. Well, I did too. In fact, right out of high school, I worked at Foster's Freeze. It was a nice soft serve. But I mean, I get tired too. And I think that pastors probably get very tired of being attacked all the time too. And even from their own people, they don't like what they're preaching. They're preaching too much. They're not preaching enough. And I experience that. People tell me that you talk too much about this issue and not enough about this issue. Why aren't you fighting on this issue? And that's why we're all needed, Jim. That's why every single one of us need to say yes, because one person cannot do it alone. Right?
No, that's true. But the thing about the destructive response to not liking something somebody else says, there's something
demonic.
There's something psychologically wrong about that, or demonic. But I mean, we need to elect people at the legislature in the state of Hawaii that are willing to make those things punished crimes.
Yep. And we're going to, before you leave, we're going to do a show again. We've done it before. We're going to do it, and we're going to keep doing it until people hear about what a good candidate would look like.
Okay.
And because I do think that there could be somebody who maybe the Lord could be kind of calling to run for office, and maybe they don't know it yet. So maybe after they listen to us on the show, they'll be like, yes, that's me. But having said that, it goes back to what we've been talking about today. If you run for office and you are a person of faith, you need to be ready to be attacked, because it's going to happen.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So I think that's what we'll leave maybe in these last couple of minutes is to acknowledge that our viewers and listeners, people of faith, have probably experienced some kind of attack in their life based on what they believe. Maybe in their workplace, maybe in their home,
in their neighborhood,
in their neighborhoods. Sometimes you wear a shirt, a Christian shirt, and somebody comes and attacks you because they don't like the shirt. I don't think I've had any experiences like that, but I've had people tell me that people don't like something that they're doing that's Christian. Crosses, sometimes wearing a cross will offend people. Even Christians are offended sometimes by the type of cross you're wearing. Whether Jesus is on the cross or not on the cross, I know can be a big issue for people too. But the point is that we need to, what are you blinking at me like that? You know it to be true. But let's not do that anymore. Let's start focusing on Christ, on the risen Christ, the powerful Christ. We're getting ready to celebrate Easter, right? We're going to celebrate the risen Lord, and we are going to not be afraid to let people know that we serve a mighty God.
No, that's true. But seriously, if the government, law enforcement people are not allowed to put people in jail that commit violence on other people because of the subject matter that caused them to get mad, which is happening around the country and here too, we can't have people like that in government.
Nope. And we're going to say it right now that it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think the attacks are going to come harder and faster. So make sure that you stay plugged into this show. Make sure you're going to church on Sunday. You need to hear the word of God. And like this video, share, subscribe, hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And stay tuned, because on the next show, Jim and I are going to be talking about, Jim, give him a teaser.
Eric Metaxas's movie.
Yes. Letter to the American Church. So we'll see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.